Welcome back to Texas Cafe Classics. One of the staples of the Floral Heights Cafe was the Tuesday Sirloin Tip Day. Sirloin tips are cooked pieces of meat in a rich brown gravy. And my God, they're good. I mean, it's hard to describe. It's about my favorite thing that Daddy made down at the cafe was sirloin tips. And it was Tuesday, was Sirloin Tip Day. And sirloin tips are I've never seen them really in a lot of other places on the menu for sale. I assume there are other restaurants that offer some kind of sirloin tip style dish, but what we're going to do today is specifically the way he made the thing down at Floral Heights Cafe. Now, one of the good things about sirloin tips is it doesn't really matter what meat you use. It needs to be lean beef and some beef grease, because this little jewel right here is your key to tender, not the cut of meat. And a pressure cooker gets used a whole lot in a cafe because it takes so much time off of the process of cooking meat that is not tender and rendering it edible. It is it's a time saver, and the way it works is there's just standard old chemistry. Is if you elevate the pressure, you elevate the boiling point. So if I elevate the pressure inside that pressure cooker to 350 degrees or 300 degrees over the normal boiling point of 212, then I accelerate the cooking process. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some relatively tough meat today, and we're going to pressure cook it for about 30 minutes. And then we're going to thicken it with flour, kind of like we did the chili recipe, the same kind of trick. And then we're going to serve this delicious, I'm getting hungry thinking about this. We're going to serve these sirloin tips over mashed potatoes. Now this is going to be good, so hang on. We are going to use a horribly tough piece of round steak today. This is a piece of my custom killed beef round steak, and it is all but inedible when it is medium rare. It is all but inedible. But we're going to render it edible with our pressure cooker. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get the pressure cooker ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fry this meat in some beef fat. And I have a handy supply of beef suet, which is leaf fat, kidney fat. You can call it whatever you want to. And I'm going to fry this extremely lean meat in this fat instead of using olive oil or some other handier type of fat, because beef fried in beef fat just tastes better. I want the beef fat in the sirloin tips. And so I'm just going to put this on the stove right here. And I'm going to start that rendering down. And then I'm going to take this piece of steak, and this is a piece of round steak, and because I know you've noticed this anomaly, this is not sirloin. All right? Why he called it sirloin tips, I have no idea. Because he never used sirloin. He would use brisket bull brisket, which was bull meat. I've talked about the bull meat he used to buy from the packing company. It was cheap. It was lean to the point that it was just purple. Looked like horse meat. Big, thick strings of muscle. You could see the fascicles in the muscle. It was tough. And it had to be cooked real thoroughly before it was usable. But it made fabulous chili, fabulous hamburger, and sausage and everything else after it was processed. But to make that into tips, he had to do some extraordinary cutting on the thing. So we're going to take this piece of round steak, which is real similar in texture to that, and I'm going to cut this into relatively uniform pieces. I don't care what the shape is. And you'll notice that I'm cutting them across the grain, right? Now you can see how lean this is. There's not a bit of fat in this at all, and that's why I've had to add some beef fat into the pressure cooker so we can actually fry it and get a caramelization on the surface of the thing. You cannot serve cooked beef this lean without the addition of some kind of fat because it tastes like shit. All right? If you're prepared to do that, then you can make food out of shoes. Okay? You cut your shoes into small pieces, and they would taste exactly the same as this stuff right here without the pressure cooker and without the fat. So, those of you, people who are, vegans or who doesn't like fat? Santana. That's like Dean Ornish.
Santana.
Dean Ornish, the Ornish diet, whatever the hell that was called. He thinks fat's poisonous. Dietary fat is poisonous. And, if you're of the opinion that dietary fat is poisonous, then don't make any of these recipes. Just don't do it. Because there's fat in all of them. Because fat is what makes food good. Okay? It's why people like butter so much. Right? Grease is coming along nicely. It's rendering down. You can hear it. The friendly sound of fat frying on a hot metal surface. One of the more friendly sounds in the world. Now, I'm cutting this meat into relatively uniform sized pieces so it all gets done at about the same time. You could use chunks if you wanted to. You could use, you could cube it. You could just use regular stew meat if you want to, but my recollection of the pieces of meat in Daddy's sirloin tips were that they were little strips, kind of like I'm making right here. In fact, this knife, you look at this knife. This knife came out of the Floral Heights Cafe. My dad used this knife to make this stuff. And I think that's cool. I don't know about you, but I think it's kind of neat. So, I'm going to get all of this stuff cut up into the right size pieces. What I'm going to do is add it to my pressure cooker. And now, we've got to let it brown off. Sounds like it's getting close. I can tell it's getting close because I'm starting to see the grease at the bottom as the juice from the beef evaporates. And what I'm going to do is brown this off real hard to create create a gravy. And then I'm going to add to the intensity of the gravy with this product right here. This is a very high grade beef bouillon. And with that small an amount of beef, I think it needs some help, so I'm going to add a little beef bouillon to it just to intensify the beef flavor. Things coming along nicely. Meat's browning off. Potatoes. All I did is cube these potatoes up and boil them. Then I'm going to put some salt and butter and some whipped cream in them just to make them good. Got to fix things up. Everything we're going to make is going to be fixed up to where vegans can't eat it. Pour some of that off. Okay, so I'm going to add the bouillon, and this big knife's a handy little tool. You don't even have to have a spoon or anything. Then in addition to the bouillon, I'm just going to add salt and pepper. This is some extra special pink Himalayan sea salt from the seas of Himalaya. Pink, like mucous membranes. And I don't know why that appeals to me so much, but it does. And a little bit of black pepper. We don't, Texas Cafe classics are simple dishes. We don't, do things like the French do them here in North Texas. And then the only concession we're going to make to any other flavor besides salt and pepper and beef is a tiny little bit of garlic powder. Just the tiniest little bit. Okay, so this is browned off pretty thoroughly. Most of the pieces of the meat are brown on at least one side. And I've got a nice glaze forming on the bottom of the pan. And now I'm going to deglaze this pan with some boiling water. Now the reason I'm going to use boiling water is because I'm in a hurry. All right? I'm in a hurry. If I put cold water in on top of it, then I've got to bring everything back up to temperature. But that's not what I want to do. I want to get this ready for the lunch run. And I'm working on this, start about 9:30 in the morning, and I want everything ready by about 10:30 or quarter to 11. So I've got to have all this, I got to think about what I'm going to do in terms of the time. So the boiling water cuts down on the time that I've got to spend getting this meat cooked. And now that I have got the pan deglazed with water, and if you're doing this at home, I'd suggest some red wine for the deglaze. He would never have done that, but it's good. It's a wonderful flavor if you want to deglaze with red wine instead of water. But water is the way it was done at the Floral Heights Cafe, and that's what I'm trying to show you today. So now, once I get all that done, I'm going to get my pressure cooker top installed. And now, I'm going to let this thing cook. I'm going to move it over here to a slower fire. And I'm going to wait about 30 minutes. And in 30 minutes, I'll take this off the heat And then we'll finish up, and I'll show you how we're going to turn this pot of delicious beef into sirloin tips. Okay, it looks like the meat's done. And I'm going to reach over here with my little safety tool and vent the thing. That's so cool. All right, while that's thinking about itself, I'm going to make up my flour and water to thicken. Now, if you remember from the chili show, we thickened our chili with a flour water mixture, and we're going to do the same thing with this. And I've got some flour in this bowl, and so I'm just going to add a little fairly hot water to it. Hot water reduces the amount of clumping that you have problems with when you put water in flour. And I've got a lot of flour here, and I'm probably not going to use all of this. But flour's cheap. At least it is now. And I'm just going to whip this up with my fork. And just make a little, it's not even a batter. This should be very, very watery. And, you know, there'll be some residual lumps in the bottom of it, but I'm not going to use it all. I'm going to pour the clear part off at the top and then stick it in the tips. Now, let's take the top off. Take our little safety lever off there. And we have got a nice pan full of lovely brown gravy and beef tips. And you can see these. So I'm going to turn the heat back on under this till I've got some boil going on. And since I want a little more gravy than that, I'm going to add some water to it. Then I'm going to let that come back up to a nice hard boil. And then I'm going to put this flour mixture that I've cooked up into this. And this is real interesting when you do this. You start adding the flour and water mixture. And as you add it, you have to stir it because it sets immediately in the heat. And you don't want to overshoot this because you don't want to over thicken the gravy, which is real easy to do if you're not paying attention as it goes in. Because this stuff will immediately thicken. I mean, the minute it hits the boiling water down there, it's going to immediately thicken this. So, now I'm boiling. And I'm going to put a little bit in there. And I'm going to stir it around and see what it does. It's already thickened it quite a bit. I'm going to put about that much more in it. And I'm watching this. I'm titrating, basically, the flour into this solution. Into the beef, rather. And that actually is just a tiny, tiny bit more of that. And I can turn the heat off underneath that, and this will still continue to cook. The heat sets that flour and makes a nice, thick gravy. And you can see this. Oh, it's just lovely and beautiful. So now it's time to plate these puppies. Or these bad boys. Plate these bad boys, as they say in the cooking shows. And salt the potatoes. Potatoes love salt. And I like to put pepper in my potatoes as well. Salt and pepper in the potatoes. Just like that. And now, I'm going to mash these up. Stir them around a little bit. And now, put a big mess of mashed potatoes on there. And then I'm going to put the tips on the side and on top of the potatoes, just like this. Now, boys and girls, this is good. This is good. Sirloin tips served on top of mashed potatoes. The Floral Heights Cafe way. Thanks for joining us today on Texas Cafe Classics.